my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. And man, it's our last Thursday Trends episode of season number 2. Wild to say we are at episode 103 of just this season. We've done over 200 episodes of this podcast total in Life as a Gringo. Wild. I'm filled with a lot of emotions. We'll kind of get into that a bit in our Mi Gente segment. I'll give you guys some updates on the potential future of the podcast and everything like that. And I'm going to be riding solo on today's show. I just want to kind of take it all in as we come to a close on another season. Just in case you are not aware, I'm going to beat this into your head. The Street Stoic podcast, my second podcast, is out right now. Season 2 is ongoing right now. So the beauty is there's a little bit of an overlap between, when this podcast ends and now Street Stoic is going on right now. We're in our third week, I believe, of Street Stoic, which is a daily sort of 15-minute Monday through Friday podcast. That's just inspiration, a good way to help you get your day started on a positive note. Combining ancient Stoic philosophy with hip hop lyrics and quotes to give you some motivation, some inspiration. Maybe help you look at life a different way if you're, just going through it like we all are on a regular basis. So the Street Stoic podcast, available everywhere you find podcasts. Go check that out if you haven't yet. And with that said, let's talk about what we're gonna kind of get into on today's show, right? So today we're gonna talk about a bill in Texas that is essentially stop and frisk before Latinos, and it is a way to violate essentially anybody who looks like they potentially could be an immigrant or here illegally. So basically any brown person in Texas can be, violated as far as their civil rights go. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll give an update on the really tragic mass shooting that happened in Maine. And I just think thoughts on our country and gun control. And I hate to keep bringing up this travesty, but it's just kind of proof of why we shouldn't have access to these things. And we'll talk a bit about that. And then our Mi Gente segment on a positive note, I'll give y'all some updates on things, and we'll kind of begin to, gently land this plane, if you will. That is Life as a Gringo, the podcast. So we'll get into all that. But first and foremost, let's do a deep dive into some of the nonsense, the BS, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so one of these stories that's just really, really fucking appalling to me. You have these Texas, lawmakers creating this Show Me Your Papers bill. They passed it. Now, luckily, you have a Texas representative kind of going after them, but it is just a step backwards for our country when things like this get passed. So you have Texas legislature, they were debating a new state bill that would allow, quote, local and state peace officers, quote unquote, to stop and send people to Mexico who they might perceive are here illegally. During the discussion, Republican lawmakers cut the debate short, allowing the bill to be passed. You had Representative Wale from Texas stating that this new bill is attacking his community, making it difficult for them to gather. After Republicans' motion to cut the floor debate on the bill short, Wale aired out his grievances with his colleagues. According to NBC News, Wale begins his speech saying, quote, "We're being attacked on a daily goddamn basis. I've been sitting here my whole goddamn time listening to y'all motherfuckers. It pisses me off. None of y'all motherfuckers know this shit, bro." I just want to pause there for a second. I'm not ad-libbing there. This is how this lawmaker is speaking, this representative, and I love it. This is the type of energy we need. Somebody who speaks like us, who is not trying to play nice in moments where it's very obvious that people are doing some fuckery and they need to get the business, at least verbally, right? Now, the new Texas law opens the Latino community to random, quote, show me your paper stops by just about anyone. Now, this is scary because I had talked a few weeks ago about that story in Connecticut where those landscapers were harassed by local neighbors, landscapers actually being Puerto Rican legal citizens, but were harassed and verbally abused, eventually arrested. And I actually saw a video on them recently, like on TikTok, like the news interviewing them. Of course, Karen is crying and saying she had one too many drinks and that her son's Puerto Rican. She's not racist. Oh my God, it's so unlike me. Yet you did it. Yet you were all about it, right? But anyway, it's what's scary is when you think in terms of those types of stories. I mean, shit, you or I could just be walking down the street and one of these racist people could accuse us of being illegal and try and detain us. And then how is this going to end? You're going to have somebody running up on me on the street trying to detain me because they question my citizenship in this country with no real reason other than the way that I look, right? And they're calling these people, what was the word that they used over here? They're calling them local and state peace officers, right? So according to the ACLU, the Show Me Your Papers law signed by Governor Greg Abbott will allow almost anyone to ask suspected undocumented people for proof of residency. Now, again, what do you think is going to happen when you have people pretending to be police in the street and then thinking that they have the law behind them? I mean, look what happened with that young man, and unfortunately his name is not coming to mind. I'm going to Google this real quick, but the kid that was running in Georgia who was eventually shot and killed, Ahmaud Arbery. I apologize for not remembering his name off the top of my head, but Ahmaud Arbery, who was just harassed by guys who thought they were being good Samaritans. They wanted to play police for the day and were accusing this poor kid of robbing houses. And it eventually led to him being shot and killed by one of these men. And luckily they got, sentenced to prison time. But what do you think is going to happen when you actually put this in writing, right? And you have Jennifer Canales Pelas, Texas policy attorney and strategist for the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, tells NBC News that the law is, quote, vague and opens up Latinos to an open season of discrimination from the people around them. The law grants, quote, peace officers the right to stop, detain, and question people about their status. The ACLU explains that it will allow citizens to start investigations and make it impossible for, quote, police chiefs and sheriffs to prevent individual officers from asking anyone the officer lawfully detains. This could include routine traffic stops or someone walking by going about their day. And this reminds me of the stop and frisk law that happened here in New York City, where you had a disproportionate amount of black men being harassed by the local police department because basically they were given free rein by some law that if somebody looks, quote unquote, suspicious, which to them was anybody participating in streetwear culture, as far as fashion goes and hip hop fashion, that they can stop them, frisk them, and see what they were up to, essentially, with no real cause or any real evidence as to them doing something illegally. So, of course, it led to innocent people being harassed by the police, altercations breaking out, and, all kinds of unnecessary situations happening with citizens just literally trying to go about their day. And this is right on there, and it's disgusting when you're already seeing the amount of violence when it comes to brown people being targeted. Again, you are seeing the idea of Karens on the street accusing people of being here illegally without any real evidence or feeling like it's their job already. And now you're literally empowering them by telling them there's this law in place that allows you to do so. It's just wild, man. And I try to stay positive. And that's like a broken record when I say that. But, I try to, right? I try not to, say this world is fucked and just, do your best to enjoy life until the end of days type of thing. But it is, tough to keep that glass half full when stuff like this gets written into law and it's so blatantly racist and so blatantly puts the safety of regular people at risk unnecessarily. It's people are not hiding their racism anymore. And that's what scares me, and I feel like I've probably said this a bunch before, but like you can't even publicly shame these people anymore. right? We live in the era of access where all of this stuff is being shared. People are able to see information in real time, and we're able to dig up all kinds of things on anybody who's a public figure, and they can't really do much in hiding anymore because of social media and the way that media works in general these days. Yet it's not changing the way that they act. They literally have no shame whatsoever. You can't even publicly shame them into doing the right thing anymore. And that's what's scary, because at the end of the day, it was sort of the greatest weapon. The only weapon we had was bring their bullshit to light, and it will sort of make them have to course correct. And now we live in a world where they literally have no shame about things like this and are not even concerned with the backlash of very obvious racist practices like this one. And then it's like, how do you even police that? Or how do you even combat that and hold them accountable when they're literally have zero shame and there's nothing that you could say or bring up that is going to make them course correct at that point, right? Yeah, it's just I don't have the answer for that aside from voting. This is why local elections matter so much, by the way, right? Because these are local lawmakers, congressmen, people of that nature writing these bills into law. Or someone like Greg Abbott, Governor Greg Abbott. He's not the president, but he's somebody who has a lot of power to inflict a lot of pain on our community. And that's why somebody like him needs to be voted out of office, and we have to get out there and support candidates at the end of the day, right? It's the least we could do. And it's just sad, man. It's just scary stuff. Again, anybody in Texas listening to this, if you are, appear to be other than or Latino, I'd be personally, if I lived out there, a little bit concerned that some Karen is going to go off on their tirade, and it's going to lead to a really terrible situation where you're going about your business and somebody is trying to play police for the day for no reason other than their own racism. You're just empowering crazy people to do crazy shit, and that's a really, really scary recipe for the world that we live in. At the end of the day, that's incredibly, incredibly scary to even think about. Yeah, I wish I had a more positive way to end that. And I wanted to give an update on the gunman in Maine, the mass shooting that happened. We talked about it on the last episode. Really tragic stuff, obviously, and I wanted to just kind of follow up with a bit of what's been coming out. I'm not going to go too deep into it. It's incredibly depressing, and there's a lot of information kind of coming out, but just kind of giving you a gist of it. The man was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And to me, it's another tragic showcase of why we need gun reform in this country and our inability to properly police who has guns, who keeps their guns. With that inability to police that, it's us as regular human beings constantly putting ourselves in danger when we are just doing normal life things like going to the supermarket, going bowling, going to a bar or a restaurant with friends. Because of this sort of selfish culture we live in where we got to have our guns, Second Amendment rights. Because of that bullshit, we sit here, living in tragedy after tragedy, essentially. Now, in this case, you actually had this man's family contacting officials about him, right? So I think it's the Sagadahic County Sheriff's Office was contacted in May of this year by this man's family, said they were concerned for his well-being and shared that he had access to firearms. His 18-year-old son told a deputy that starting around January, his father was, quote, starting to claim that people were saying things about him while out in public, and this is according to documents that were shared by the sheriff's office. His ex-wife told the deputy that this man picked up 10 to 15 handguns and rifles that were at his brother's house. The ex-wife and son said their plan was to stay away from him, according to the documents. So this is somebody who is being identified as highly armed, 10 to 15 guns, no joke, is being very unstable to those around him to the point they felt the need to call the police. Now, after speaking with his family, the deputy spoke with representatives of the 3rd Battalion 304 training group and connected them with his family, who assured the officer that they would ensure that Card received medical attention. So I guess the family that he was currently living with or closest to, they assured him that they would receive medical attention. Okay. So this is around May. They promise that he's going to get medical attention, which when we read later, we'll find out he did do that. But rather than just having his family promise you that he's going to get medical attention, in the interim, why not become proactive and say, okay, let's have some accountability as far as where those potential firearms are. Let's take those away. Very, very least, right? But again, as we've seen time and time again, there's either a disconnect between the law, those enforcing it, and their lack of concern, or the lack of precedent that there is in these situations. I'm not an expert on it. I'm in this particular, sort of case or these cases, I'm asking the questions. Like, where is the checks and balances system? Right? And that's what is frustrating to me, because we've seen this story play out multiple times in different places, different players, different areas, but it's all the same story for the most part, right? There were generally always people ahead of time, for the most part, who kind of suspected that this person was not in the best state of mind, that they shouldn't carry a gun. Oftentimes, police were called ahead of time. But it seems like there's something lost in translation between this person being under watch, at the very least, making sure they have no access to weapons at all. There's like something that gets lost throughout that process that then allows for a tragedy like this one to happen. And this is why guns are such a problem in our culture. And I'm on board with saying, sure, the majority of gun owners are responsible gun owners and are not going out there to commit these heinous crimes. I'm on board with saying that, sure. But for the small percentage that are, and the massive amounts of pain and death that they inflict, we have to consider that more than the fact that majority of people can handle their shit, right? Especially when we're talking about something that is non-essential like guns. And that again is the disconnect. It's like the moral part of it versus what you personally want, like understanding what's better for the greater good rather than your own personal self, and being on board with that. That's a part of it. And then also, again, the fact that we can't properly police these things, keep track of who has guns, who's mentally unstable and shouldn't have guns. The fact that there's not a streamlined process that somebody has been able to come up with to make sure that the wrong people don't get guns or get their guns taken away. That to me is proof that we as human beings just don't deserve to have guns, because we can't figure out a way to consistently make it safe. And of course, nobody's asking for perfection. Mistakes are going to happen. There are going to be things that unfortunately, sort of sneak through. But this happens far too often at this point for us to even use that kind of logic, right? And especially when it's preventable. When you can have a weapons ban like the one we saw in the 90s that brought down mass shooting crimes, right? Those things are preventable to a degree. I'm not saying it's a perfect system either. But whatever we can do to make one less mass shooting, I think is worth it, right? Especially and I'm not justifying any shooting whatsoever, but what makes these acts even more horrendous than your average shooting, there's no rhyme or reason. It's literally strangers going about their day, not in, their army base training, not at a police force, station somewhere. Somebody bowling, somebody eating dinner, somebody having a beer with their friends, somebody grocery shopping, somebody's grandma grocery shopping, someone going to the dollar store. Everyday shit. And are being targeted. That's the scary part about this, and why, we need to do whatever we can to prevent it from continuing on, right? Now, moving on with this story, they're saying that deputies actually went to the gunman's home weeks before the shooting, so in September, after an Army Reserve unit reached out to the sheriff's office and asked for a wellness check. And they reference a moment that summer where the suspect Card was getting a beer in West Point with some soldiers when he accused the three of them of calling him a pedophile and ended up shoving a soldier and saying, quote, he would take care of it, according to a letter shared by the sheriff's office. That summer, he was taken to a psychiatric hospital where he spent 2 weeks before being released. There's also another incident where Card and a soldier were driving home from a casino when he again stated people were calling him a pedophile, told his friend to knock it off, and talking about shooting up places and people. Just obviously stories on stories of this person just being unstable, right? The deputies went to his house September 15th and again on September 16th, but didn't see him. Now, they're saying that the shooter had access to a safe containing guns. Investigators believe the firearm used in the shooting rampage was legally bought in mid-July. So let's go back on this timeline. Gentleman bought it in mid-July, where they're saying that on July 15th, and this is after May, his family reporting him, his ex-wife and son, after that report, and the other family saying that he would get help. Now in July, being reported by some of the Army members he was affiliated with, he was still able to go out and buy a gun. And this is just days before he was hospitalized in order to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. So this is the question that happens. He goes and gets hospitalized for a psychiatric evaluation. Why does nobody take his gun away from him? Right? Now they're saying that his brother managed to change the code on Card's garage gun safe for some period of time months ago because he was concerned about his, quote, behavior and his possession of several firearms. Card's brother told law enforcement, according to a search warrant affidavit. But Card still had a key to the gun safe and had access to his firearms before the shootings, his brother told authorities. Okay. And I'm going to stop there because I think you get the point. You have somebody who is having multiple accusations against them, literally is having to get psychiatric treatment, but nobody is physically removing the gun safe from his garage. What? And call it bad policing, call it a lack of going the extra mile by his brother who just changed the code rather than, calling police and saying, get these guns out of here, get this safe out of here. Whatever it might be, right? I'm sure there's going to be more to it that unfolds. There's a lot of details here if you really want to read through it. The timelines, I'll leave the link in the show notes. But I just wanted to create like a quick example of like the failure of the system, be it the people in his life and the police around there that were aware of this man's instability. Again, it's ineptitude on every level that shows you we are not a society that has figured out a way to hold weapons of destruction in our personal possession safely. And I don't think anybody's capable of that, right? That's why the countries that have some of the best, the safest, rates as far as lack of gun-related deaths. I'm sure there's a better way to say it, but I'm kind of, I don't know, just like frustrated when I read shit like this. But anyway, a place like Japan that barely has any gun-related deaths, like they just have extremely strict gun laws, like to the point it's almost impossible to get one. Because there is no way to really be on top of this, right? And listen, to the credit of the police, I don't know how big this town is, whatever it might be. I'm sure they're, spread pretty thin. They have a lot of other shit going on. They can't watch every person that is accused of being unstable who potentially has a gun. Like, I get that. But again, because of that lack of ability to police this properly, we shouldn't be able to have them at all, especially when you're talking about, these rifles that have the capability of taking out a lot of people in a very short period of time, right? These weapons that are sadly the weapon of choice for a lot of these mass shooters. If we live in a society that can't properly police this stuff and keep track of who has one and who doesn't, then we can't have it at all, right? Because it unfairly puts the rest of us in danger when we're just going about living our lives. And that's just logic at the end of the day. If we can't safely have these things, then we probably shouldn't have them at all. Regardless of if you and your cousin are safe about this and you guys are responsible, if somebody down the block is reckless with it and this is something that can take people's life very quickly, a large amount of them unnecessarily, we should do something about it, right? It's no different than drinking and driving, essentially, right? Everybody who's ever driven home drunk before hasn't gotten into an accident, right? Right? There have been people who have driven drunk. I'm not recommending this, obviously, it's terrible. I'm just using it as an example. But without even looking at statistics, I'm pretty sure that if you were to account for everybody who drives home drunk on a Friday night, majority of them got home safely. But it's a big enough problem of people hurting themselves or others while driving under the influence that it still needs to be illegal and still needs to be policed, right? Because we understand that even though the majority of the people may not run into an incident while doing it, it's still enough of a problem and enough of a danger to the public that we need to police it and keep track of it. And it's the same thing with guns. Specifically, when we talk about these higher caliber, these semi-automatic rifles that are used in a lot of these shootings. Again, because they can take out a lot of people in a very short period of time. That's why these mass shooters love them so much. And there's no other use for them in regular, normal life outside of war. Aside from people, wanting to feel like a bigger, badder person by having one of them. And that's where we are. And I just wanted to bring this up, kind of give an update on everything. I know it's heavy, but this is the conversation that needs to be had. It's just, to me, again, it's logic. I can't let it go because, like all of you, I'm sick of having to read about these. Like, it's to the point that, when I see it pop up on like my iPhone, like the news thing I have, I'm never like shocked by it. I'm saddened. And half the time I don't even feel, I like quickly glaze over it to see, where it was. And then I come back to it because I'm sick of having to hear about it. But B, it's so normal that it doesn't feel like it's like this immediate breaking news thing that I have to be all up and informed on right away. And that's what's scary to me, is that it's become that normalized to me that I'm not like, sort of glued to the TV with my whole day uprooted by it, because it's just so normalized at this point that tragedies like this are happening out there in the real world unnecessarily. So that's that update. I'm gonna leave it there, and we'll move on to some positive stuff as we begin to start closing out the show for our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so on the positive side of things here, hard turn from what we were talking about earlier, but I just want to take a second to express my gratitude. And I know we have one more episode. We'll have Tuesday's episode before the season is officially done. But I wanted to just really express my gratitude to each and every one of you who listen to this podcast, each episode every week. It really means the world to me. I know that sounds so cliche for anybody who, does anything and they're just thanking people. But this podcast has changed my life. And I feel like I've talked about it a bunch over the course of the last couple of seasons, of where I was when I, was starting this podcast or just before getting the opportunity. I was ready to kind of pack it in. I was going to move on to something completely different and walk a very different path in life. I was kind of done with media, done with trying to have a voice. And I was, probably going to live a little bit more of a selfish life, to be honest with you, and I had ideas of going to Puerto Rico and opening a vintage store. And, that sounds cool, but it wouldn't have been a fulfilling life for me completely at the end of the day. Right. And this podcast opportunity coming along gave me the bridge, gave me the runway to hang on just a little bit longer. And then it grew into the thing. And then it grew into the thing that kept connecting me to more things. And now, 2 years into it, it's wild to kind of see where my life has gone. And it's wild it's only been 2 years when I really think about it in retrospect. I'm always beating myself up about like, I want to be here, I want to be there, I want to be doing this. But it's only been 2 years of stepping out onto my own. And I appreciate all of you for being a part of this journey, right? For supporting me, no matter where you kind of joined, be it day one, be it last week. You're all supporting somebody who took a leap of faith and bet on themselves to build the life that they've been dreaming about. I quit radio at a very popular radio show while on air at another very popular radio station. And I just went all in on this podcasting thing, and just sort of bet on my own ability to create opportunities. I even, I was, had another full-time job that I was able to do remotely from home. And eventually I just ended up leaving that and again went all in on being my own business, being self-employed. And this is officially year 2 of that journey coming to a close, in just 2 months at this point. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm sure I'm going to plan something special for our last episode of the season. But yeah, I don't know. I think I hope that anybody listening to this, I just want to serve as like a spark for you. I think for me, in the least corny, self-helpy kind of way, I just hope that you recognize every time you press play on this podcast, I hope it serves as a reminder that you can find success and find happiness and should have the confidence to bet on yourself. And I'm never saying recklessly quit your job tomorrow type of thing without any planning. And I want to make that very clear. But like I'm living proof of that. And this road has been really hard. A lot harder than a lot of my peers, to be perfectly honest. A lot of my peers who are successful found success a lot quicker than I did. And that doesn't mean they didn't work their ass off for it or whatever the case might be. But for me, it came a lot later than a lot of people that I know. I'm 35 years old. I didn't become financially stable, like truly financially stable, like 2 years ago, probably. Maybe we can include, 2019, the year before the pandemic, but even then, I don't know. This has been a long and hard road, is what I'm trying to get at. I'm very nostalgic. Even like the end of the year always gets me this way, but now, like when we close, a chapter, which is this season, yeah, I'm just proud, man. I'm really proud of it, and I'm so happy that there are, other people who feel the same way as me, and I found community within that. I know I say that a lot, but I truly do mean it. And I guess getting back to what I was saying about being that spark, I think, I do a lot of different things. The podcast, I write the books. I'm always saying yes to, people who want me on their podcast. I'm doing my best, always just constantly creating, producing content, right? Whatever it might be. And it's like this, sort of dream of mine, this idea that when I'm long gone, there's going to be this library of information and potential inspiration for anybody who wants it, right? That's why I love like somebody like Nipsey Hussle, who did so many different interviews. There's so much content of him speaking about life and his philosophy that people like me can continue to be inspired by him even after he's gone. And before him, somebody like Tupac comes to mind, where he was constantly recording, with the idea that, he felt like death was around the corner. He wanted to make sure he left a lot of things behind, kind of, for people to enjoy. And although I hope death is, nowhere near my corner, but my point being, I do all this to serve as that spark. And I know a lot of people who are in any position where they've like achieved something will be like, I'm not anything special, I'm just a regular guy. You can do it too. And it often sounds like, it's like, okay, it's easy to say that as like whatever, you're Jeff Bezos type of thing. But I really think it's true. The one thing that I could say as I sit here, and like really just in my feels a little bit, um, I just worked hard. And I'm still working really hard. And I'm still trying to figure it out. It never stops. And that's the thing that has given me these opportunities. It is just working hard. And I really do just and like that sounds so stupid, cliche, blah, blah, blah. But it is really that simple. It's the idea of like, no matter how many times you're knocked down, you just keep getting back up, right? You keep trying new ideas, new approaches, new this, new that. You keep trying to find ways to carve out, a 25th hour and a 24-hour day type of thing, right? Where can I work on this more? What can I do more of? Blah, blah, blah. What connection can I make? Where can I push myself? And constantly having that attitude and constantly going for it and pushing past the fear and the self-doubt that exists in all of us, myself included. That's what's going to get you over that hump and closer to where you want to be. Do I think I have certain natural gifts? Yeah, I do. But I also came up around a lot of people who are far more naturally gifted than me in different ways, and they're not doing any of what I'm doing now, right? They gave up on their dreams a long time ago, and that's the difference. They stopped showing up to put in the work at some point, right? They said, I've taken enough of a beating. I'm good, right? They threw in the towel at some point. And I'm not shaming anybody for that. We all have different thresholds as far as what we can take, as far as, the trauma that is the life of chasing after your dreams. But if you want the truth of why they might be where they are, why I am where I am right now, and why anybody who's somebody I look up to is where they are, it's because we all got knocked down and we repeatedly just had to keep making that decision. Have I had enough? Am I going to throw in the towel? Or do I keep going? Do I get up to fight another round? And that's the difference. I just kept getting up to fight another fucking round. And I think I'm going a little bit all over the place. And I hope that this is helpful to somebody listening. But I just want you to experience the joy and happiness. And it's not perfect. There are days where I am down like anybody else, where my depression kicks in, where I just don't want to do anything. But majority of my week is not spent dreading going to work tomorrow. I don't feel that pressure of oh my God, it's getting late. I got to wake up early. I'm literally sitting here in my studio with my dog bothering me because he's bored while I speak to a bunch of incredible people that I've been searching for my whole life. And I get to make a living doing it. Like, that's just insane to me. You know what I'm saying? And it's been a long journey, and I'm kind of bouncing around, but like, I want you to be able to reflect on your day, on your life like that, and just be wowed by where you are. And to be quite frank, no matter where you are in your life, you should be wowed because you've gone through some shit. We all have, and you're still here standing. But I just want you to know it's worth it. Like, if there's one person in this world that you can look to that has really run the gamut of things not working out the way they were supposed to, it's me. Like, I am so, I don't know, I don't want to say behind or overdue because those are all sort of like the assumption of you're supposed to get this. But yeah, anybody I think following along would have been like, this is never going to happen for him. At this point, like, he's done everything. He's put in the work. He's been a good person. He sacrificed everything, and he still hasn't gotten to the point where he figured out how to scale it, how to make it something legitimate. If there's one person that can give up and quit without feeling any shame, it would be him. It would be me. And I'm just grateful that I didn't. I can tell you that even if it happened a little bit later for me, and others people probably older than me that are listening to me say this, and they're like, "Kid, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You got so much life to live." But in my industry, I'm one of the older ones, essentially, right? That 35-year-old, I'm on the outside of the, of the demographic everybody wants, 18 to 35, right? I'm pushing on the outside. I can tell you that when it does happen, when you do get the opportunities, it's just as sweet as it would have been back then. In fact, I think now I can probably appreciate these moments a bit more and just how far I've come. And I'm really grateful for that. So with that little speech aside, I'm really happy to announce that actually today we got the letter that we're being renewed for another season. So Life as a Gringo lives on. I'm so happy and proud to be partnered with iHeartRadio and my Cultura podcast network for another season. We'll be launching at some point in February. I don't have the exact date yet. So a couple months off. You can go check out the Street Soak podcast in between. But yeah, thanks to all of you for supporting it. We get to have another season and bring, more hopefully amazing conversations that help more and more people out. So thank y'all so much. And I'm just so happy. I wanted to share that with you as our mi gente this week. That yeah, we'll be back for another season, man. And that's never guaranteed. So I'm really proud. That's a beautiful thing. So thank y'all for the support thus far. With that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I just gave you guys a whole song and dance on this segment, so I'm gonna keep it short here with this conclusion stew. Listen, this bill in Texas, basically the Show Me Your Papers bill, it is egregious. It is disgusting. It is people not even wanting to attempt to hide their racism anymore. And it's sad. It's really sad. It's also scary to think the potential altercations that's going to lead to when you have people feeling like they have the right to play police officer for a day and harass people just because they look a bit different than them, and accuse them of not being here legally. And it's crazy to me that we've seen things like Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, where the kid was gunned down for running, down the street jogging, because some wackos wanted to again play police for a day and accuse him of doing something illegal. Seeing instances like that, you'd think we would be a little bit more cautious, but no. It's the inmates running the asylum. These lawmakers just want to do whatever they have to do to keep their extreme base happy. And it also feeds into their own built-in racism at the end of the day, which is just really, really sad, really scary stuff. So another dark day for the country. But again, you got to go out and vote. That's what counts. You have to stay up to date with what's going on. Local elections matter just as much as the presidency. I'd argue even more. So when given the opportunity, make sure you are out there voting. Now, update on the Maine gunman. Again, it's just a failure of the system. And I don't think, and to be honest, I think it's unfair to place this burden on the system. To think that they're going to keep track of everybody who has some sort of mental illness and potentially owns a gun. It's an unrealistic expectation. Now, could there be more systems in place? Absolutely. Does there need to be? Absolutely. But I think the only real solution is getting serious about cracking down on guns in this country in general, which then would alleviate the need for police officers to really go on these crazy crusades of having to keep track of who does and doesn't have a gun. And my dog is all over the place if you're watching this on video or you hear things in the background. But yeah, I think it's just an unrealistic expectation that everybody's going to be safe when using these weapons of destruction, and B, that we're going to have a checks and balance system that can help keep us safe and keep guns out of the wrong people's hands. Again, does that mean we shouldn't derive laws? Of course not. But it's very obvious that we continue to fall short, and there's just a horrific system in place. And nobody seems to want to be addressing it. Again, vote. You just got to vote the right people in office, and hopefully they can make the right moves. But we got we got to keep talking about it. We got to keep pushing for this and keep doing our part. That's really all we can do. I know it's not what everybody wants to hear, but it is. And lastly, on a positive note, we're going to be back for season 3. I'm so damn excited. February. And I always hate taking time off like this. I think I even had argued with them the last time because I took about a month and a half off. And I was like upset about that. I wanted to just keep going. But I will say in my more mature phase a year later, understanding the idea of balance, listening to my body, my mind, I'm not going to give you guys the best of me if we don't take a little bit of a break. I need to just be able to rest. I need to take some time off and do some me time, some quiet time, and kind of recharge. And I'm excited to have, whatever, it's like almost 3 months-ish. It'll technically be like a month and a half once I wrap up some of the other things. I'll have like legitimate time off. I'm excited to like reinvest in myself and then come back in February and give you guys the best version of me, recharged and ready to just kick ass for another year. So thank y'all so much for the damn support. Tuesday's our last episode. I'm talking like we have no more shows. This isn't the finale. Tuesday's the season finale, season 2. But I just want to say thank you in advance for all of your support. And I want to, since you guys are family at this point, you're just as much a part of this as me. I want to immediately share the good news with you that we are renewed for another season with our amazing partners in Cultura and iHeart. So season 3, Life Is A Gringo, it lives on. Now, with that said, check out my other podcast, the Street Stoke podcast, wherever you find podcasts. In the meantime, man, have an amazing weekend. And I will catch you on Tuesday for our season 2 finale. Till then, stay safe. We'll talk soon. Peace.